in Carly's brain. Okay, good afternoon. So in the last month, there have been a couple of discussion threads on the library director's listserv um, that I thought warranted a little bit of time in our open calls and potentially some information gathering. Formal information gathering would be great, but I think just a little even informal start to this work is something that I've kind of had on my radar for a while. So the two things that came up, one was kind of about the appeal process and waiving of fines, and the other was about community borrowers and some of the policies around that. I think these are two places where the collective might benefit from finding some kind of like standard practice of meeting up and matching on these things gives all of us better leverage to enforce them, especially if you have like a business office or another group on campus who's like pushing back against a decision that you make. Now, we may not have the actual policy setters in this discussion, but we probably have a lot of you who are the ones responsible for like enforcing the policies. So you know how well it's going. So anyway, um, so appeals and waiving fines, the initial question was, is there appeals process for a lost item fee? And a few people were able to provide some links to their sites here. So we have Olympics and Lake Washington technicals. And then Pearl at Clover Park was the last comment, and she asked if there was a minimum threshold amount for fines and fees before you start charging students. So an amount that's automatically waived or forgiven. And I guess, I mean, like, and the other question is like, how often, if you do that, do you do that like the end of every school year, the end of every quarter? Do you have late fines at all, or is it only lost fees? So let me share the link to this document, and and then you can throw links on here if you don't want to necessarily contribute to the conversation. But yeah, anything that you've got on fines, fees, appeals, I think would be a great addition. All right, and the link is going in chat. I think it'd be curious to like formally know how many of our schools are not charging late fines anymore, and how many schools, how many of the libraries are not responsible for collecting the lost charges. So like if a laptop is lost, like it's not your responsibility to track it down. You just send the information to IT. So I'm gonna like throw that at the bottom kind of as like my general questions. Do you charge late fines? Do you waive late fines or fees? I guess this could be fines or fees. And ignore the like yes, no of these questions, and assume there's a what are they after them. Um, um, yeah, and I do think like this is one of those things where we've there's been discussion in the past about the the changing state law about, like you can no longer hold, um, you know, diplomas and transcripts. You can't stop registration if students have fines or fees. And given that so many public libraries in our state have gone fine free, um, it would be interesting to have a survey of how many of our public institutions are following suit. I don't know what like the four-year college libraries policies are. Um, and of course, with physical circulation so often low, kind of for our community college libraries, I wonder if there, and just the CTC link, the whole platform, if there would be any benefit to trying to collect data about the effectiveness of fines and fees in getting items returned. I'm not sure that it'd be worth it to try and track that down in the system. But if anyone knows of an analytics report that um, makes sense, I'm sure Kirsty's not here, but I'm sure she would say you would have to use the, what is it, fulfillment events subject area to figure out if a like be like a fine or fee was created, was the item then returned? I don't know how you do it because analytics is real bad at showing like the path of something. It's really just here's the count of a number of things. They claim they're working on that, but only in Primo to show like the path of the user. Um, so yeah, if but yeah, so like knowing who's charging, how much they're charging, whether you have an appeals process. I don't know. Are there other questions that you guys could, like would be interested in knowing? I see a few of our frontline folks in here today. We've got a nice small group. I'm sure people are busy this week, things starting to wrap up. Um, yeah, if there's other questions that you're like, oh, I desperately want to know. Um, I'll let you think on it for a second. Abby is doing a great job of adding the Whatcom narrative. Um, I will say, like, from a user perspective, um, I was very fortunate as a Spokane Public Library staff person. Almost as soon as we moved here, I've never been charged late fines. I've only ever been charged the replacement fines. So, like, they always get my books back, but at least I'm not stopping. Oh, yeah, I'll share it again now, Elena. Hold on. At least I'm not like blocking myself from checking other things out. Um,
Well, this is really timely for us over here at Skagit because our business office, like during the pandemic, the college stopped putting blocks on people's records for having things overdue. We don't charge late fines or fees. We do charge for replacement, but they're now wanting to put blocks back
they,
on again. So I was like, I did not hear about any kind of a state law where you couldn't do
mhm.
that. So Carly, can you please
Let
reference
me,
that for me? Because I
yeah,
might
let me
figure that
find
out.
that because it passed, oh gosh, 2 or 3 years ago. Um, and Kirsty's brought it up a couple of times. Let's just, oh, where would it be? Where would it, let's see if I looked in. Well, that's not good. What's the Washington legislative code? It is WAC, isn't it? So if I search WAC, it's not gonna, well, maybe if I search WAC space. No, it's trying to be smart. Um,
It's just
maybe if,
Washington Administrative Code.
yeah, nope. So unhelpful. Um, uh, it would definitely be a document. And we have talked about it somewhat recently. Um, maybe last summer's. Okay, there's the JSTOR club. That's one we've PO lines. Uh, Relax, mailing, letter. That's not useful. Maybe it was an LLC meeting. Um, if I can't find it here in a couple minutes, I'll keep searching for it and make sure it gets sent out. Nope, that's a job posting. Um,
I mean, I'm searching in the WAC right now and I'm not finding anything related to registration blocks or library fines, library fees. Not quite sure how to search for it there,
um,
what terminology it would be.
yeah, right.
And I mean, we
Uh,
have all the individual colleges as agencies. Each college has their own title, but I don't see one overall for state like SBCTC.
well, and it wasn't
It wasn't a,
under like SBCTC. It was something else from under education, and financial aid and like that kind of stuff.
okay, so probably not Washington Administrative Code, but maybe the
Could
RC, more the RCWs.
Yes, that was the other acronym I was looking for.
Okay.
Um, uh, nope, that's not it. Um, okay, I'm gonna find it or I'll text Kirsty. It might have been one that she sent out. I'm checking my email real quick. Um, mm, is anyone else remembering this conversation? Like, I feel like it's been brought up a couple times. I'm not just making it up.
I didn't remember that it was a state law that had been passed.
Um,
I mean, I know that like it was my college's policy during the pandemic, but I didn't, because they're now starting to block people again. I would have guessed that the business office would have known if this was a state law, but you never know.
um, There's
It's
a
definitely
link.
a straight, it's definitely a state law that passed, I believe, in 2021.
Was it 2021, George? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've got something in here. I have about House Bill 2513 that somebody sent out. Um this one, practice of transcript withholding as debt collection practices. Yep.
oh, awesome. Can that,
I
yeah,
will put this
thank
in the
you.
chat. Um, yeah, so because this passed, and governor signed, yeah.
2020. Okay.
Yeah, chapter 281 of 2020 laws. I'm sure there's a way in this awful website to link to um session law. Bill is passed by legislature. I mean, yeah, this is it.
That's it. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm. Um, oh, here it is. Okay, amending and adding. So it is, I will throw this into chat. So we've got the RCW in there.
Thank
And I'm
you.
gonna put it in the conversation. Um, and uh, yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those ones that was it actually, I mean, it came up before um COVID, um, but obviously like was signed right at the start of it. So like schools may have changed their practices just kind of as a COVID byproduct and maybe did or didn't realize that this was also changing at the same time. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, definitely a thing. Okay, cool. Glad we were able to find that.
Thank
Um,
you. That's great. Thank you.
I'm gonna highlight this in here so that boop. Um, yeah, so that's why, like I think the library also moved away from doing fine and fee collection, one CTC link and all of that, but also just that um institutional policies um had to change because of this RCW and with, equipment being worth way more than like a missing library book. I think business offices and student affairs and those kinds of offices wanted things handled in a different way. Um, so it's all fascinating. Um, oh, thanks, Haley, for adding that. So yeah, so I think, like seeing who's still charging fees, seeing who has policies like available is something I should, if anyone would like to volunteer and work on it with me, we can make a spreadsheet. Um, but maybe I'll just, fill a few chunks in my schedule with um some of that. So the other conversation that came up, um, and in addition to it being another circulation policy, I think it's um, really apropos to the work that I'm doing with CTC Link, um, and the required information for community borrowers, and then the lending policies for community borrowers, because I'll also be looking at lending policies for all user groups to see how different they are. So this one was started by Mugs, um, and Harold weighed in, and so did Claire. And but this one's interesting. What really caught my eyes was requiring a physical address, because one of the things that I would like to really advocate for is student records that don't have a physical address. Um, some of the patron loads don't include those at all. And so it adds a barrier to students being able to check out materials. And sometimes it's just because the address didn't get entered in the right field, or there's a delay or whatever. But if there are students as well as community borrowers that are experiencing homelessness, do we, like, how is that being handled as far as requiring physical addresses in patron records? And, like, is there a difference between allowing it for a community borrower and allowing it for a student? You know, that's, yeah, that's, I think, a conversation as well. So, and there, you know, Whatcom has the collaborative agreement with other libraries in the area. So, like, that's going on. And I guess this also applies to Bellingham. And, but then I think some schools do not register community users at all. And then others may not have much information regarding their policies because they just don't get that many. Um, One of the things I looked at a few years ago with WLA was um, putting in one place on the WLA website um, what libraries around the state allowed walk-in use or community borrowing based on state residency, and then which ones was it based on, like, county or city. So, like, by law, if you walk into a four-year school here in the state of Washington as a Washington resident, um, they do have to provide access to their resources on site. So you can walk into a UW library, Eastern Library, Central's library, and use their computers there, browse their books, use their resources on site. I don't believe they are required to give you, like, a borrowing card or borrowing privileges, but you have to be able to use the stuff. So one of the things WLA was looking at was the private libraries around the state. Could we entice them to give WLA members either discounted community borrowing privileges or free community borrowing privileges? And this would be, wonderful in a town like Spokane, where Gonzaga has amazing archives, as does Whitworth. But to get a community borrowing card costs a little bit of money, but it's such a nominal amount. Like, why not just give it free for people with the WLA membership? Anyway, now I've gone on a total tangent, but yeah, so I'm like fascinated by community borrowing practices. Of course, some of community user policy comes directly from licensing of our materials, because electronic resources, the license is generally limited to individuals who are, like, formally connected with the institution. Although there has been some pushback from larger institutions and consortium around the language of those types of clauses in contracts, because, like, what if your faculty is collaborating with a scholar somewhere else, and that person doesn't have access to the same content, but they are creating, scholarly content, you know, is that person associated or not? And so they're, um, like, so the, like, preferred wording is to not list out defined classes of associated individuals in those electronic resource licenses. So not, limited to student, faculty, and staff. and go for something more broad, because then your own library policies about guest users, community borrowers, associated scholars, researchers, etc., can be used to apply access permissions to those accounts. However, usually Easy Proxy is feeding off of your identity provider, that's usually email, the email system and registration and CTC link. So guest borrowers aren't going to have access unless you create their own password and username. Yet another thing that Open Athens might be a little bit better at. But yeah, sorry, 16 tangents in one thought. But yeah, so it would be interesting to find the RCW that pertains to this as well, so that if people have published policies, we know that we're not limiting, like not having the user group of community user in Alma is probably fine. But I don't know what the like legal restriction that's permissible to not giving them privileges. So Shoreline, community user card with proof of residence, only good for checking out physical materials, 10 items, no study room reservation or computers available. Yeah, and that's probably pretty common, although the computers available thing is a tricky one. As state institutions, that's where I want to see if like we need to have some public access computer. So often now, PACs, good old PACs, um, don't, you have to log in with like a specific login. So a walk-in user can't just access the web. So um, it's interesting because we talked about at Whitworth, like, is it necessary to have a guest user account that a circulation employee would then like go over and put in on a computer so that a guest user could use it for 30 minutes and it has an auto timeout or something? And basically our IT department was like, we're not doing that for you. And we're like, oh, okay. um so there's that kind of like, I don't know, like tension between like security best practices, um, and giving people access to computers, but also if they can get on the guest Wi-Fi on your campus and use a mobile device or their own laptop, they can access your electronic resources. So there is a way to do it, but digital divide and like ability to own a device that connects to the internet and can access content like that. Anyway, now I'm just on my soapbox. Somebody stop me. But yeah, maybe we look for the RCW around content access. I'm trying to remember what it's. That's the state library. Public. Yeah, Shoreline, I think you guys are actually the only school that has everyone log into Easy Proxy regardless of location. So everyone else has some kind of IP range with Easy Proxy that is associated with on-campus computers or Wi-Fi. And I was actually surprised when I was going through all the libkey setup to find out that Shoreline's the only one that was doing that. Okay. So here's the one. This is about minors access. Um, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with regular content. Um, records. Here's school library stuff. Oh, this is a good. I should probably keep this one. Oh, we'll just put it here. What's this one? State librarian. Yeah, it's probably in this one. Although this is about public libraries, it's not about the higher ed libraries, but it's got to be close by. Because that's maybe UW has it. That's yeah, so this is what I was thinking of, but it wasn't. Um, I'm gonna keep searching, but that's that same one. Okay. Nope. Well, I'm gonna find out what I can about um that and see if I just imagined it. Um, but I suspect there's something about yeah. But yeah, so like what the so some of the questions that I would think of is like what are like the required pieces of information. Or verification. Uh, yeah, and account activity is also an area that I will be looking at closely with the CTC link project. How long we keep our users active? Not so much with students, but with faculty and staff. Some people have the script that they're using to bring in from CTC Link or Data Link is basically every single day it's setting that expiration date for the user a year from the current date. And then you guys get annoyed because you go into a user record and it shows the change in their history for every single day. And there's just like hundreds of entries that are useless. And then other schools are just doing like a once a year, like re-up to the next July or whatever it is. And for adjunct faculty, that those could be have interesting impacts. Whether your data link script brings in an adjunct faculty in as like a part-time staff, or if you just have one big staff group, and adjunct faculty, you may want them to have library permissions longer because they need to be able to set up course reserves ahead of a class 2 terms out, but they're not teaching in the meantime. So yeah, so the community borrower, intersection with user group policies and how people are brought in via data link. Yeah, so if there are any other burning questions that anyone has about community borrowers, I'm kind of curious how many are registered across the system. Um, but yeah, and so this conversation was ongoing as of last week on the library director listserv. So if you would like your library director to chime in on this, you can certainly let them know that we chatted about it during this meeting. And if anyone would like to volunteer to collect information on these various circulation policies across the system, I imagine it would be a go website to website, find what you can, and then email or call to get details that you can't find on the website, and then we can confirm them, the policies via Alma configuration. Because I would not be surprised to find that written policy is not accurately reflecting Alma setup, because that would be, typical. Yeah. Other circulation policies, we're coming up, end of the quarter. And I haven't heard of too many issues with notification letters going out, but I did hear an interesting, like, that maybe Bobby is still around. Is Bob? Yeah, but Bobby, you were saying that one of your circ folks was reviewing the fines letters, and in addition to email it, like all of them were getting emailed, but then they were taking a look at any that were of a certain amount, maybe, and also mailing those. Um, and I think that kind of goes um, hand in hand with like waiving of fees versus like handing off fees for actual collection. Um, because, like if you're talking about a $3 late fine or something like that, it's not worth anybody's time. And it's imaginary money if it's just a late fine. Which, I think imaginary money is a real theme in so much of the financial environment today. So, uh, yeah, so that's, something interesting if, like if you have practices around notifying students of late items, of late fines that are maybe not um, specifically automated in Alma, but something that you do outside of Alma automation that we could kind of share out because maybe there's a way to automate it. Maybe there's you know, someone else who's doing it and has, got a policy they can share so that yeah, anyway. But yeah, circulation policies is um an interesting conversation to me because the folks who have to deal with the students and enforce the policies are so rarely the ones making the policies or making sure that they are communicated out. Um, and so having a resource for our our frontline people, the uh, the circulation warriors, who I so respect, uh, where you can, maybe find your own policies a little bit quicker than wherever they may be buried, or be able to say, hey, everyone else is doing it this way. Maybe we need to think about a change. Um, yeah, so many ideas and websites and information that uh, I I want to do. I think like information about circulation policies was one of the first things when I got hired that I was like, Wade didn't have a document of everybody's circ policies, but didn't you guys just configure all of that? Like that would have been the time to write some things down as a collective. Uh, so um yeah, because if we want to look at a future with reciprocal borrowing, um, and like resource sharing, they're getting these things outlined and knowing what's going on across the system. Um, any any other questions or like topic areas that I can add to this document as a jumping off point for future conversations or potential info gathering? Feel free to anonymously put them in the document too. Um, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's like really come up. Um, hmm. um, All right. Well, um, yeah, please.
Hey, Carly, are
Yeah.
you gonna keep looking for the RCW? We're kind of interested for the one on community in particular. We've had some incidents recently that it'd be good to know what
Mm-hmm.
our responsibilities are, right? To everyone. So I mean, I'm gonna keep looking for it too, but if you find anything, hopefully you'll share.
Yeah, well, and I'm wondering too if there's actually maybe even two separate RCWs that we need to consider about access to public spaces versus access to library resources. Um, that, like again, I mean, I'm in the weird situation where I worked at a public library, which and a private academic library. So we could just say no, you're not allowed on its private property. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna keep looking for those. I think it's more of a dig than anyone wants to watch me do in a meeting. Uh, but probably a good reference to have. So yeah. Um, all right. Well, I will I'm gonna stop